Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending our special board meeting for July 30th, 2020. We please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Once again, thank you for attending. Could you please call the roll, Mr. Parkinson?
Here.
Mr. Kennedy? Here. Mrs. Patterson?
Present.
Mr. Stevens?
Here.
Mr. Tench?
Tench.
Tim, you here?
Yeah, I get you. You keep cutting out. I'm here.
Okay, thank you. All parties are here. Once again, thank you for attending our special meeting. This meeting was called last week to hear additional presentation regarding our school opening. And we felt that it was very important to hear our staff members, Dr. Sulico and her team, to present some additional things to us. So at this time, Dr. Sulico, I'm going to turn it over to you so that you can start your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Good evening, board. Good evening, members of our staff. If you don't mind, Mr. Stevens, I'm going to step over to the podium.
Go right ahead.
Okay, good evening again. I'm going to take off my mask for this portion. Board, as Mr. Stevens had mentioned, we're at a very challenging time in history, and I think we're all feeling the pressure and the stress of what's been going on around us, whether it's personally, professionally, and the decisions that we need to make. And tonight is no exception in what we're going to present to you this evening. And for the viewers at home, I know we have a bunch of them. I want to get you up to speed if you have not been able to tune in, but if you recall at our last meeting, the Board of Education accepted our recommendation to start the school year in the hybrid fashion. And since then, things have obviously changing on a daily basis. And since this virus has hit, I have been communicating to our parents and staff and pleading with them actually for their patience and understanding, because things are changing on a daily basis. And we've learned one big word, we've known it, but it's become very popular, which is fluid. And that is what we're seeing today, that it continues to change. So with that all said, we are going to speak to you this evening about another plan. You saw last time, you saw plans A, B, and C, but you saw the full-fledged hashed out plan of Plan B, which was the hybrid, which we were recommending to the board at the time. What we did not go into detail, and frankly, took a lot of time between now and then to plan, was the full on-site and the full virtual, which we had the planning and we had things in place for either one of them. But as you know, we spent a lot of time on the hybrid. This evening, I would like to spend the entire time talking to you about the option of going fully virtual. So if you could please slide. Okay, so what I'd like to show, and those of you whoever, James, if you're flipping through, I'm going to have to ask you you're going to have to go through slides here a little bit. So the first thing I want to mention, first and foremost, we know, I think everybody knows and that's watching, is that we are, the Cuyahoga County's in the red. We're in the level 3, where we've stayed there for quite some time. There's been threats of us moving to purple. We've not seen that happen just yet. But in addition to that, we are faced with making these decisions based on the data that's presented to us. And I wanted to share a quote that I watched 4 times the other day as I was on my treadmill in the morning. My morning routine is putting on Channel 8 and watching the news. And one of the things that I heard the governor say in response to all of this is that he doesn't know what the right decision is to make, whether opening up schools is the right decision. And there's the quote, "I don't think any of us have enough information at this point to know which one of those decisions is the right decision or the wrong decision." And so what I say to that is, we have a governor, we have a president who are surrounded by the top officials. We have Cleveland Clinic here, we have university hospitals, we have top advisors that the governor has access to. And yet superintendents are left to make these decisions on opening up schools. And I don't claim to be, I might have the title of doctor, but I am certainly not a medical doctor, nor would I ever want to be. But so this is what we're faced with. And what all we can do is make the best decision that we think with the information that's presented to us. So this evening, as we look, we know that experts don't agree. We have politicians that don't agree on what's happening in our world. And then we have people running the gamut on from this being a hoax to treating this extremely seriously. So we are respectful of everyone's viewpoints, but it still is going to polarize groups, and it has polarized groups in the varying degrees. But again, we're here tonight to hear about our options and what we have in the best interest of safety of our students and our staff. What I'd like to speak about is just the current state of affairs. This is not said with judgment. This is not said with any kind of malice or intent. This is what we are seeing right now. So again, experts, politicians don't agree. We also have teachers unions. Again, this is not a criticism to unions. I will say up front, our union president is here this evening, but I would say this if she were not here, in that we have had great success in working with our unions. So this is not, when you hear unions speaking out, it's not Bedford's City Schools unions that have been out protesting, if you will, or sending letters or speaking out. But we do know also that the AFT has given the okay, if you've seen the news, that they are speaking out, and there's threatening the safety strikes. So they're not necessarily encouraging, but they're supporting to some extent that if teachers wanted to, that they could strike based off of safety concerns. So in addition to that, we certainly have the staffing concerns as well. So in looking at this, we've been sampling our staff and finding out who has concerns or who would qualify under the ADA, American Disabilities Act as an option, and the Families First Act that's come out from the governor, and that have protections for people who are being affected by the virus, whether it's childcare or health related or related to a relative and they're not able to come to school. And board, we've gotten about 8 or 9 requests just so far from teachers, and we anticipate that number climbing. That was off of when we first announced the hybrid, but we certainly have a concern, and not just here in Bedford schools, and speaking with superintendents across the state, we are concerned about the number of staff members that potentially could exercise this right, and then who would we have in front of our students, because we're all going to be vying for the same substitute teachers. And so that is certainly a concern. And what should be first and foremost is the concern for the safety and well-being of our students and our staff. So those are all our current state of affairs and all the things that are happening surrounding us and things that we have to take into consideration. As I mentioned before, wanted to reference this again, our county is in the highest level. So I'm sorry, our zip code is in the highest level among all of the cities in the county. So if you look here, this is available. They change, I believe they update it once a week, and I thought it was on Fridays, but it is updated weekly. And if you notice in red, that's our zip code, 44146. All 4 of our communities fall into that zip code. And if you notice at the very top, for those of you who are at home and maybe not able to see it as well, that's the lowest number of cases that are reported in the zip code, and in the certain zip code, and go all the way up to the darkest green. And as you'll see, we're in the darkest green, and we've been there since July 3rd. And again, as it's dated weekly, but prior to that, we were in the category preceding it. James, can you go back to my other slide? One more? Thank you. So one of the things, so in looking at data, so again, trying to support our decisions here and inform the board, because ultimately it is all of our decisions collectively, but I want to provide you with as much information as I can. So what we're going to look at is some more information. We did put out the staff survey, as I mentioned, in a letter. So what in that, what we were trying to gather from our staff was what they feel they need for professional development, in terms of if we were to go all virtual, even a hybrid, what supports do they need? We asked them what their level of confidence was in returning safely. I will say that was sort of all over the board. It ranged from 1 to 4. And then what worked well and what did not, so we can improve our methods whether we're in the hybrid or the all virtual. And then teachers felt that they were equipped to handle remote learning at home in terms of the tools that they would need. And also, then we will take a look at the parent survey. Okay, so James, if you could skip ahead then. Thank you. So here you see the results from our parent survey. I first will tell you, if you look at the number of respondents, We have 1,000 families that responded, or 1,500 students. That's less than half of our student population. So while this is pretty inconclusive either way anyway, it does not represent our entire district. And if we do decide to go the hybrid route and offer the all virtual, we will have to push the other 1,000 families to respond, because we will need to know their commitment. This was that commitment survey that went out. So with that said, we had 56% who supported, now of students, so 848 students, virtual program, and 661 or 44% supported the hybrid. So we do have more parents that are in favor of the virtual program. A 12-point swing there. So the one thing that I did want to point out, and I don't have my notes in front of me, but I do recall I asked James to give me a breakdown of grade bands just to see if it was, that elementary parents wanted their students to stay home, or secondary. And I will tell you, it was like pretty even across the board. There was no all high school stay home or all elementary. The numbers were spread out. And so it was, again, inconclusive in terms of age level. James? Thank you. So tonight, this evening, as I shared with you, that we're going to look at the virtual model. But what I want to say to the public who's watching and to the board as well, that as you all know, board, I am on several calls a week with various superintendents, with various lobbyists, with people connected to the governor's office, and we're hearing a variety of things. And one of the frustrations for every superintendent, and why we lose sleep, is because we're told to just keep waiting, just keep waiting. We're waiting for the governor to talk about sports. We're waiting for the governor to talk about daycare. We're waiting for him to talk about schools. And then it doesn't come. Again, today, a disappointment. We were expecting to hear something further about sports, and we did not. So on our latest call, we did receive a letter that seemed a little bit more robust in terms of the believability, if you will. But we've been told that the county, actually Franklin County, we do know, has made a recommendation that all schools go virtual for the first, I believe it was the first quarter. There was talk about counties talking about just the first month or versus the first quarter. Personally, it makes more sense to do a quarter if you're looking from an academic standpoint. But they believe that Cuyahoga County is going to follow suit. Now, I don't have that confirmed, but we have been told to wait to see what the county is going to recommend, that they're going to come out with recommendations, and that should be very soon. We have a board meeting next week. Again, I would encourage the board, and of course, it's your decision. But if we listen tonight to the virtual option and the hybrid that we've already heard about, we can take a week to see what happens and digest all of what we're going to throw at you this evening, and perhaps we can vote next week. And that would just be my recommendation, but certainly that's your call. So again, this evening with the virtual, we want to explore the entire virtual model. But with that said, some of what I'm going to say to you has not fully been vetted with the union. We have a meeting with them actually after the next board meeting. If the intent is that we would make a recommendation, we would then know what direction we're headed, and that we would then kind of flesh out some of the union issues that may emerge. But I will say that the union has been with us the entire way. What you see this evening, teachers, union representation, union leadership have all been part of this. So what they see tonight would not come as a surprise, but again, not fully discussed and reached conclusions on. So some of it you'll hear, like this first one, for example, says explore the possibility of CTE, special education, some special education and or preschool students attending in person, and the notion of delivering related services in person. So that's OT, PT, psych, speech, etc. So we've talked about it with the union. We are looking into that. We know that there are some of our most vulnerable students. We also know that CTE, career technical education, for those of you at home, much of what they do is hands-on. If you're learning to be a barber or cosmetology or auto tech, that's a lot of hands-on. So there is some discussion about potentially having some of those in person, a hybrid approach. But again, we haven't decided that. We would have students attending 5 days a week. And I threw in here a bullet, so I didn't forget to mention athletics. This is a large, you heard me say it when I opened, because I feel as though I am, again, when we are inundated with updates, sports, we're good for about 3 emails, texts, correspondence. I look at it, Dr. Johnson, because she and I we have many conversations about sports and what a hot topic it is. But again, with very confusing guidance. And so our options with athletics, and I'm not necessarily recommending anything this evening. I would see that I want to give you your options that we see them. Suspending, well, we know that they suspended scrimmages for full contact sports. That's already occurred. We have options that are being discussed in surveys that are out there regarding postponing the season. Hot off the press. Thanks, James. We can cancel it altogether, or we can continue workouts and wait until the governor makes a decision. And that's what a lot of districts are tending to do until we hear more. But again, we thought we were going to hear something today, and we did not. So the other thing that we have to discuss besides athletics, because we know there are so many more extracurricular activities for students other than sports, in a full virtual model, we would still continue those clubs and activities that could be done virtually. And what we would ask is the people who are in charge of those to rewrite, not necessarily rewrite the whole job description, but give us what that would look like in a virtual model. So if you have student council, for example, that's probably something that could be done virtually, but what would that look like? How often would you meet? What are the expectations, et cetera? So we are open to extending that. We truly believe, you've heard me say this the last time, how fearful I am of this recommendation, but knowing the other costs, which is safety and security of our students, just so sad about it all, and that our students would be missing out on being in person. But one way to stay connected would be through extracurricular activities for our students. So with that said, I would also continue the recommendation to start students after Labor Day. That's on the table as we discussed. We would be voting on that next meeting, and I've prepared parents for that. I do believe it still would lend great value, and I'll tell you why in my next slide, which is it would allow for preparation and professional development. So let me tell you what those 10 days would look like.
Dr.
We would-
Sacco, can I
Yes.
interrupt real
Oh,
quick?
sure,
Because this is just hot off the presses.
That's what James was just showing me. Yes, go ahead.
The Cuyahoga County Board is recommending that area schools begin upcoming academic year operating remotely due to elevated risk, and to cancel all extracurricular. This as of 5/15.
Well, I told them to have that for me before 5 o'clock, and they didn't. So now I'm upset with them. I'm calling them tomorrow. No, I'm kidding.
Sorry.
Well, there you have it. We're expecting it. We're told today, tomorrow. I don't really buy into all of that all the time because we're told that a lot. But there you have it. So board, with that information, we can do with that what we will. If we want to change course of what I just said, I would be fine with that as well. But so thank you, Mr. Kennedy. So the topics that we would cover, and I won't spend a lot of time, but I want you to know how valuable these 10 days would be prior to the students attending with that date shifted back. We would be looking at equity and universal design for students, which is otherwise known as UDL, and strategies for co-teaching for our special needs students and all students particularly, and that would be a day. We want to spend a day on social justice and diversity. We have a plan in place for that day and a variety of topics to cover. We would definitely need technology training, and we want to spend a good portion of our time, 2.5 to 3 days, on tools and assessments and introducing all of the different options to teachers, to better prepare them for a full virtual model. The safety and social emotional learning, PBIS, we know that's important. We're hearing a lot about social emotional needs and concerns of our students while they are away from us. The team planning and collaboration time. So again, this would give teachers 3 days, 2 to 3 days of planning that they would be working with their colleagues, planning collaborating with one another for ideas, and planning out what that would look like with virtual options. And then we would have a virtual open house and classroom setup, and they contractually get a day to do that, and a contractual day with the convocation and building staff meetings. So that would be our plan for the professional development. You can see that we certainly can use our 10 days wisely and are in the process of planning for those. And before I turn it over to Felice, I just want to mention one more time that I know how difficult this is as a parent, and the decisions to be made for the safety of our students, and the difficult decision that boards of education are faced with, as well as superintendents. This is the most difficult decision I've been faced with in my 5 years as a superintendent. I don't take this lightly. I take it very seriously, and in evaluating all of our options, as do I know all of our board members. I can assure the public that they have had a number of great questions. They've expressed a great deal of concern for our students, and that's first and foremost. So I do want parents to know that whatever decision we make, probably 56 or 44% of you are going to be upset. We have we know that, and are going to be scrambling for daycare, for trying to teach your students at home potentially, and the difficulty that poses. I know firsthand how difficult that is, and can appreciate what that means for parents. But I did want to say that, and that we are trying to make the best decision, and I trust this board. I know that they will do that, and we work together as a team to make that decision. So thank you. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Felice Willis, our Director of Curriculum.
Good evening, members of the board, members of cabinet. Thanks for having me here this evening as I share with you our proposal for how we envision ourselves moving from the virtual model that you saw in the spring, where we were teaching in crisis mode, to a more cohesive instructional plan across all of our classrooms. Our overarching goals, right? We have millions of goals, but to try to sum this up in 3 very easy goals to understand, we will be striving through this process to make sure that each student has equitable access to a learning environment that will allow them to progress and learn. So we'll be taking a look at our curriculum, our learning targets, our programs, our resources, our interventions, to make sure, again, that all students are getting what they need. We will be, again, doing something a little different in this environment than we did in the spring, because our goal will be to prevent instructional loss. That was not necessarily the goal in the fall. We were trying to give students an opportunity to close some gaps, but here we will be working to progress students forward through the curriculum and not emphasizing things necessarily from only the past. So new learning will occur, and interventions and supports will allow students to have minimal instructional loss. And then finally, in regards to all our stakeholders, parents, students, teachers, administrators, we'll be looking to be simplistic, right? In the spring, we took advantage of everything we could because we, as I said before, we're in crisis mode, but now we'll be trying to simplify the routines and the structures so that for everybody, this process is more palatable. So the way that the learning will occur is via 2 different delivery methods, and you see those explained to you on the screen. I'm sure you're hearing the terminology through the media and you're reading, synchronous and asynchronous, and that is indeed the vision that we see. Our teachers will be involved on a daily basis from the start of their contractual day to the end of their contractual day, providing instruction, and that instruction can be delivered synchronously, which it would be similar to a traditional classroom, right? That's real live instruction, live interaction, live feedback for students. So it's a 2-way communication between student and teacher in the classroom during synchronous activities. And you see up there a list of what some of those examples of what some of that synchronous learning might look like. On the flip side, right, because we don't want students online for 6 hours a day in direct instruction with teachers. We clearly know from the research that that would not be successful. And so there will be times when students are working asynchronously, which means that it's more learner-centered, it's self-paced, they're doing it at their own time and pace, they're doing it in their own location. And it's just them and their work. They're not getting immediate feedback from teachers, but they got their instruction at the start and they know what the expectations are. And so you'll see there, again, a list of some of the asynchronous type activities. So students and teachers will be toggling back and forth between these 2 methods of delivery. And so now let's talk a little bit about the instructional model itself. As we've alluded to, our expectation, our proposal is that teachers will be coming to campus and instructing from their classrooms 5 days a week. And that while teachers are on campus, students are not. Most students will be entertaining their instruction from home from a district issued device. And Mr. Myers will talk a little bit more about that one-to-one and the security that we feel around being able to provide devices and internet access for our families. Students will be adhering to their class schedule. So if students had 4 courses or classes that they thought they were taking in the spring when they left school, those classes will again be on their schedule, and they will receive daily instruction in anything that appeared on their original schedule, no matter the grade. So all the core courses, the electives, they will essentially be following their master schedules. And I'm going to show you a couple examples quickly that you can take a look at. As far as resources, we'll be using those things that all of you have board approved. Our curriculum frameworks, our graded courses of study, our pacing guides, all of our textbooks, those materials, all those board adopted things will be the source of the instruction that students receive. In addition to that, we will be augmenting, because again, we want to keep kids engaged, right? And there are a plethora of technology tools and apps out there. And so we, a committee administrators and teachers have vetted. What we actually did was poll the teachers about things that they used in the spring that they fell in love with, because remember, they were using everything. And again, no fault of theirs. We wanted them to do that. But now, as I said before, our goal is to be more simplistic about this. We don't want kids on a million different platforms and have a lot of things out there that parents are trying to maneuver through, teachers, administrators, the tech department is trying to support all of that. So we're going to try to streamline that. And what we did in the committee was take a look at all of the recommendations from our staff, and we will be providing them with a vetted list of resources that will be aligned to their grade level and their content areas that will be recommended from the department for usage. So the list will still be, I feel, it's looking as though it will still be relatively broad, but it won't be too broad. We are definitely have eliminated things that are in violation of the privacy policies and that don't align to our curriculum documents and don't align to the instructional strategies that we're trying to have teachers using in our classrooms to best advance our students. And then, of course, you will also see later in the presentation that we will continue to use some learning software for students. We have always had supplemental, well, not always, but quite a bit of the time, we've had supplemental software for students that allow them to have some personalized instruction on the computer. And so the intent is still to continue with those platforms that we have used and had success with in the past. And I'll talk a little bit more about that on a coming slide as well. Delivery-wise, again, going back to that word simplicity, you're probably going to hear all of us saying it all night long. We are looking to have the students in grades K-3 having their pre-K3 having their instruction delivered via Seesaw, and our students in grades 4 through 12 will be having all of their instruction delivered from Google Classroom. So again, instead of teachers picking perhaps maybe what they're most comfortable with or what they like best, we are going to try to simplify that by having everybody using the same platforms, easiest for everyone that way. The Seesaw platform is a little bit easier for the primary students. Google Classroom can get a little bit cumbersome as far as turning work in and accessing materials. Seesaw is much more user-friendly for our primary age students. And so we have opted to, and was used, again, is coming to us recommended from teachers. So it was widely used in the spring, and we've decided to make an adoption of that. Again, continuing with the instructional delivery, you will see a mix of live synchronous and then not in real time asynchronous activities happening every day. I'm trying to decide how to read this. Why can't I see the screen from here? Oh yeah, so teachers who are providing synchronous instruction will be recording all of that synchronous activity. So for two purposes, right? So for kids who want to have additional time to go back and rehear the lesson because they need it, or parents because they want to assist students with what they were taught, that lesson will be available and posted to one of the platforms I mentioned earlier. And then we fully realize that we need to be flexible as far as the parameters around which our families are trying to operate during this time. And we may have, and will likely have, students who may not be able to participate in a synchronous activity. And so giving them access to the recording will again allow them not to miss out. We'll provide them with that equitable access to the content, even though they couldn't hear it live. I talked about leveraging the technology tools to keep kids engaged, and keep in mind that what happens in the classroom is what we're expecting to see happen online as much as possible. And so there will be whole class time, there will be small group time, and there will be targeted individual time for students during the day. Our interventions and supports will continue as usual. We have no intent and don't see any reason why we need to change up being able to provide tutoring, extra studying time, modifications, accommodations, and differentiation through this online virtual environment. So we will intend to continue to do that again so that all students' needs will be met. We are considering, we haven't decided on this yet, but we do realize in the pre-K 5, 6 level, they may need to have a backpack of materials go home with them sometime at the beginning of the year. They use a lot of manipulatives. A lot of their work is through paper workbooks. We actually want young students writing on real paper, practicing handwriting, et cetera. And so we are considering what kinds of things might need to go in a backpack and have students pick those materials up so that they can continue with their learning at home and again, not be missing materials and be able to work through the lessons with their class. So I'm not going to go through the schedules I do have a sample pre-K 6, a sample middle school, and a sample high school schedule. Again, just to exemplify for you that the intent is that students will follow a schedule. At the high school, it's pretty much the bell schedule, no adjustments made there. In the pre-K 6, there are a few adjustments. For example, in the pre-K 6 world, we're looking to collapse all of the lunch periods into a single period. There's not any reason to have an hour and a half in the middle of the day for 3 lunch periods to occur. That's a logistics thing we do when we're in person, but not necessary in the virtual world. And collapsing that lunch period then allows our teachers to hold office hours and to offer no new instruction and intervention supports to students during that time. So you'll see that kind of adjustment made in the schedule. But all schedules will allow for children to follow their schedule and get all of the courses that they originally intended, for all grades to have no new instruction nested in their day so that we can continue to provide academic supports and enrichments. And all schedules will allow for teachers to have 2 to 3 days of office hours, so that if students or parents or families want to reach out to them, they have time during the day and access to a teacher. Attendance is another hot topic in the virtual world, right? We do have a law being handed down to us from our State Department that we must take attendance even in the virtual world. And so our proposal is that we will be taking attendance during each instructional block. So at the elementary building, when they are on for math, a teacher will take attendance. If they jump back on an hour or so later for reading, a teacher will take attendance, so that we are accountable. We're holding students accountable for that day-long attendance, and we can provide the data to the state to show that we are taking attendance for our students throughout the day. The same thing will happen at the middle school or the high school as they move from period to period. We'll be taking period by period attendance. I put up on the screen there a lot of different ways that teachers can do that. Again, we have a lot of technology tools that will make that not as cumbersome. And we will, of course, be advising teachers on some ways that they may want to take attendance so that they're not losing instructional time. That attendance then will be reported through Gradebook. I believe that that's kind of the direction we think we're going at this point, so that, again, for teachers, it won't be cumbersome. They already know the process. And having that attendance on a period by period basis will allow us to continue with our traditional attendance procedures that we follow. If students are not attending school, parents receiving emails and phone calls, activating our school attendance intervention teams, et cetera. So all of the traditional procedures and protocols that we follow will be followed in this virtual environment at all. Expectation is that students will be online and present for learning. We also, again, are aware that we will have students who are not responding, right? We're not seeing them. They're not checking in. They have a lot of missed days of school. And so we are working on a protocol to be able to use our SEL staff, our school counselors, our support staff, to be able to assess and assist students who we are not hearing from, either in a no response at all, or we know they're out there. We can see on Google or on GoGuardian that they are present and on the internet, but they're not turning in work, or that they are not present because there is some barrier. So we're kind of intending to triage those 3 situations. They all should probably receive some different kind of response, and we intend to have a plan in place, again, to be able to assist those people who are not attending. Grading and assessment. As we return and shift back to a more traditional classroom, we too will be shifting back to traditional grading. We'll be intending to use the board adopted grading scale. There will be no need to issue passes or fails and look at participation. Students are involved in new learning. We are providing them with the resources they need to participate, and they will be receiving grades. So in pre-K 6, those students will be graded on the standards, and then quarterly in grades 4 through 12, they will also receive letter grades on their report cards. Assessment-wise, of course, we're going to continue with our assessment practices as usual. As I've said, I'm kind of a broken record, hoping that this doesn't look a lot different than our traditional school. We have to get out of the box and think about how to do it, but the intent is not to change the best practices we already have in place. And so formative and summative assessment will still be a part of students' daily lives. Those are district designed assessments that teachers can administer in a synchronous or an asynchronous environment, depending on the assessment itself. A lot of pre-assessing will need to happen. We realize from the work that we did in the spring on our gap analysis that we will have students that have gaps, no fault of their own, right? Just a result of the situation. And so pre-assessing regularly so that teachers, again, can target their instruction and take kids from where they are to where they need to be. And we will continue with our benchmarking assessments that we do through NWEA MAP. A little bit different there. That will be delivered in a remote setting, though. They will not be coming to school to take those tests. NWEA has a process in place that Mrs. Shunter is working on with them, so we'll be able to gather benchmarking data from our students. Academic supports, I've alluded to a lot of those already, but again, of course, we know that there will be students who are coming from non-traditional settings or students who are just struggling academically, socially, emotionally, mentally, and so making sure that there are supports in place to help them through this will be one of our priorities. I mentioned the office hours, the recording of lessons, the intervention periods. We are hoping to be able to offer, I feel like it's, as long as we get approval to move forward with this model, our intent is to have some evening help sessions in grades K through 12, 2 evenings a week, again, to allow those students who have not been able to access a teacher during the day to get access to a teacher 2 evenings a week. And also that will provide additional time for those students who were actually present during the day but are still looking for some additional assistance. Parents could access those help sessions as well. And so again, trying to make sure that everybody has in place what they need to make their educational experience the best that it can be given the situation. We will continue with our co-planning and co-serving teachers. We have parapros, we have intervention specialists. All of those people will still continue to work in the classrooms virtually alongside the academic teachers. Mr. Myers is going to speak in a few minutes about the technology supports that we have in place for students, staff, and families. And Mr. Elder is going to speak a little bit about the supports from our SEL staff. So we have all of that in place as well. And then I did mention the learning platform. So you see that I listed them there for you. Hoping to be able to use iReady for English language arts through grade 5. We have Read 180 available at the secondary level. We have a new experience that we're going to be using with our NWEA scores. Those scores are directly mapped to Khan Academy, and students in the area of math then will have a personalized learning path based on their MAP score. So we're going to go ahead and put that into place in the fall. And then that we are using Great Minds Eureka Math, which is really predominantly a face-to-face program. And so the publishing company itself has come out with some learning pathways that will help students to continue in their math instruction, again, mirroring the way that we would be teaching the program if they were in school. And so looking to use that platform as well to continue to provide students with intentional, targeted, and personalized instruction. And then Dr. Selico spoke already to you about the career tech, so I don't need to say a lot about that, but you've heard me talk a lot about our students who are in work-based learning, our students and all the success that they have with their hands-on learning. So it's important that we consider that and again, try to allow them to access their education the way that they need. So looking and hoping that perhaps the career tech students will be hybrid. And then the last thing I thought about this, I jotted it down. I did not mention CCP, so I don't want to forget to remind you that students who are in college credit programs that are offered through universities will be continuing the way that university so deems. So if those universities are face-to-face, then our students will be receiving their education that way. If they are virtual, then our students will be receiving their college courses virtually as well. So I'm going to turn it over now to Mr. Myers.
Board, at this time, after each presenter, we want to have some questions for them. Do you have anything that you want to say for Ms. Willis at this time? Right. One thing I do need to ask Ms. Willis pertaining to the attendance pieces. What, I know you had mentioned about accountability, making sure students are present, but what do you have in place is the, because some students may not be available or may not chime in or whatever. So how are you going to deal with that?
Yeah, I don't know that we have an answer for that, but we have talked that we need to address these students who are taking advantage of perhaps the evening help sessions or who are doing the work but weren't present during the day, but they're still turning in their work. And the state does give us some guidelines for some things we can consider that would be parallel to being present. We just haven't really honestly taken a look at any of that, but we will. We realize that we have to do that. We just don't have a great answer for that right now.
I would add to that. I think Mr. Elder's point, I think it's in your presentation, your portion of it, that we are going to use our social emotional support staff and truancy officers too, for those that are just not an issue that they might not be able to, but they're choosing not to get online.
Right.
So I think that was where you were
That
going with
was too, yes.
So we do, and Mr. Elder will talk more about that. I'll say that.
I do have a
Go
question.
ahead, Ms. Boynton.
Ms. Willis, you mentioned that the lessons will be recorded for the students that are not they're present during the interactive lesson. Will that be done during the delivery or during the delivery? that
During
lesson is
delivery, yes.
recorded?
Yes. Mr. Myers can probably explain that a lot better than I can, but you can just hit record and the
Yes.
lesson will actually record, and then they'll post it to their classroom or to Seesaw.
And I guess this probably is your question. Is there going to be a device for each student in the household? Okay.
Yes.
All right. And everyone during the no new instruction time, everyone will have, the lunchtime is for everyone. And so the tutoring or extra time spent with the students will be available then.
Yes.
The intervention specialists.
Yes.
and-
And some of them may be getting their no new instruction asynchronously as well, right? So they may not always be meeting live with a teacher during that time, but they will all have work specific to their needs.
and- Oh, once you take attendance and there's a student that may be maybe missed a couple of days, haven't heard anything from them. So we're going to make the phone calls. What if we find out those students are at daycares? What are we doing to help out at the daycares?
So that's where I thought your question was going, Mr. Stevens, when we have these extenuating circumstances with families. And that is something that right now we don't have an answer for, but we know that we need to come up with, again, what signifies that they are in attendance. If they did the work in the evening, even though they weren't live, can we check them as yes in attendance? I think those are some of the questions that we need to iron out. And like I said, the
Although we
state's
would
given us
check
some
it.
guidance on that.
Although we will be checking them for attendance, we don't know what they're doing with the work. So I still would try to encourage some kind of face-to-face with those students or
Mhm.
some kind of interaction with the teacher, because we will be doing the same thing we did in the spring. We take the lessons, or we gave them assignments, we gave them a grade if they turned it in.
Yes,
It's really important that we do that. So that's the only reason I'm mentioning that, because now that the governor has opened up daycares full-time, there will be a lot of children at daycares probably.
Yes, I don't know, Mr. Elder, if you're talking about this triage process, but I think we're hoping to try to nip that in the bud a little bit more now this year. I don't know that we had a really great plan in place for those students who were just absent for whatever reason from our instruction in the spring. But this idea that we're going to try to triage students and figure out why they're absent, right? Are you just not responding because you're just not responding? Or are you not responding because you have some barrier in the home? Or is there some other reason? So I think we'll be using our SEL support staff to help us get to the reason why those things are occurring, and then try to put in place the supports that they need so that they can be present.
We can kind of be proactive with that, because we can gather the information from the 40% of families who chose to come back
Mhm.
face to face. I'm sure they gave reasons why, and some of them probably will be. So we can gather information from that source as well. That's all I have right now. Thank you.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Ms.
In
Patterson.
looking at the schedule, you have a study hall in there on the schedule. Why would we need a study hall?
So the students are following the study hall, right? So because we're intending to not modify the high school schedule at all. If the students had a study hall on their schedule, and my understanding is that there are very few of them, but if they did, that study hall will still occur. It'll still be on their schedule.
I don't see any reason why a child should have study hall on their schedule at this day and age. That's a wasted time. Some students. that's
Go
not-
ahead.
I was gonna say, President, Vice President, I can speak. Just in terms of the high school schedule, they are following their high school schedule. So some students might have that on there if they've completed all credits or something along those lines. So some of them, typically they have a full schedule. But it's very, very limited. We went through the entire master schedule this year, at the guidance of Dr. Selico, which is why you did see us hire an art teacher and things like that, because if they're not in a study hall, they're going to be somewhere. And that's where we want them to be. We don't want them to leave early. We want them to be in a class and educated, but it's very, very few. Otherwise, they could leave. So we limited that number in terms of who's coming late, who's leaving early. They have to be on track to be graduated. That also gives us a little bit of flexibility if they need time for some support. So there are going to be a few kids that might have a study hall because they might need some time to get some extra support. And that gives us that flexibility to be able to do that. But it's very, very few students.
What is the number? I need to see the number of students that have study hall.
We can get that for you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Not. Thank you, Ms. Willis.
Thank you very much.
Board President Stevens, Vice President Patterson, Dr. Selico, thank you for the opportunity to have us here to present this evening. My name is James Meyer. I'm the Director of Information Technology for the district. And as we're all aware, these times, they call it unprecedented, but these are the times that technology has been planning for since we've been able to get computers into the hands of our students. We have the tools, and I believe our teachers have the talent to provide virtual instruction to our students in this fashion. To do that, all students grades pre-K through 12 are eligible to check out Chromebooks. This would include multiple student households, so those students can be working within their schedules at the same time. Internet hotspots will be available for families who are in need of internet access so that no one goes without. We've listened to some of the feedback we received from the spring and have added help desk support now for staff, students, and parents. We've changed the way that we can collect that using a partnership with Freshdesk, and now is one of the industry leading help desk softwares, and TeamViewer, so that we can remote in to parents and students' computers if need be to be able to provide support on a real-time basis. When it comes to professional development for our staff, for our teachers, we're going to focus on 4 concepts that we will train them on in August. And those are remote student engagement, online assessment tools, differentiation, small group instruction, and digital distribution of lessons. So remote student engagement, this is the concept of how do we keep those students engaged when they're away from the classrooms, when they're not in front of us. Online assessment tools, while this can be things like NWA MAP and our AIR assessment for state assessment, online assessment tools can vary from anything from creating PowerPoints to recording podcasts to doing online presentations. There are all sorts of online assessment tools that we can use. And then differentiation, small group instruction are ways to be able to capture a scene of students, but also be able to go into that and create small groups so that you can differentiate learning. And lastly, the digital distribution of lessons. This is what Felice was alluding to earlier in the presentation, synchronous versus asynchronous. What model is best for when, and what tools are we going to use to do that? And then parents, guardians, and providers. And we mentioned daycare a little bit ago. We're going to offer online 24/7 modules for parents. So at any given time, they can go to our website and take a course from start to finish in a certain learning area, and then provide guided online sessions. So this would be a session where parents could join to get real-time feedback. And then we would like to have on-site parent-guided sessions. So if you don't have access to technology, we built out a plan for the Oakwood Summer Camp to allow people to come in and be socially distanced in our computer labs, and we feel that that'll transition quite well for parents who need to come in to get not only finish back-to-school paperwork, but also to take some of these courses. Instructional hardware. So what are we going to provide? What are the tools? For each teacher, every teacher is going to have a laptop or a Chromebook to be able to work on, a webcam and a document camera. So we're going to provide a document camera that will also act as a webcam. And what that means is, picture the video camera here that Mr. Burton is using, but it flips straight down to be able to record anything that you're working on by hand, and then flips back up. So now you have this extra added dimension when you're recording an asynchronous lesson or you're showing something in front of a virtual class environment. And we also are going to provide wireless audio enhancement. This was something that came up with the wearing of masks and face coverings. Even if we were going to be in the hybrid model, how are students going to be able to better understand teachers? And so what we've reached out and found is a product that connects to a receiver, and up to 2 teachers in a classroom can either connect to classroom audio or connect that directly in a computer so they can teach where they're comfortable. They're not stuck in front of the computer having to try and communicate there. They're able to move around, and I think it'll provide a much better environment. Other tools as needed, if there are special tools, styluses, those types of things, other software, we can provide that. And then for staff and student, every staff member will have that laptop and Chromebook, and all those have the webcam and the microphone on the system. The list to the right is a list of what we are providing and supporting as far as software. All of these things help us to create a better classroom environment virtually. One thing I will point out on there is Go Guardian. This is software we've been using for 2 years that allows teachers to have a roster and see the screens of every student that is participating in that class, whether they are in front of them in the classroom or at home. And in using that, you're able to send everyone to the same activity. You're able to freeze the screens. You're able to answer questions in a chat directly with students. And now new features will include even answering questions directly with video conferencing. So these are just a short list of those tools that we are preparing to do training and support and offer as soon as we're ready in the fall.
Any questions for James?
Yeah, I do. What type of software do you have that blocks various websites for those Chromebooks?
The Go Guardian, the same software that does our classroom management, also has blocking and filtering capabilities. And that works across any Chrome browser. So if you're logged into any of our Chromebooks, Go Guardian can restrict or allow access to websites as we see fit.
And those are in place?
And those are in place, ready to go.
So there's no YouTube, no TikTok, no...
YouTube is used very often for instructional videos, for supplemental materials.
Sure.
And I'm sure there are teachers out there who would say that sometimes TikTok can be used that way as well.
Yeah.
But that would be something that we could open up on a grade level basis or for a certain activity.
But you also do get a report of what sites were on and how long those sites, they were on those sites, correct?
That is correct. It's a different tool, but ClassLink and Clever are 2 tools that provide data on who logs into what and when.
And my question is if we see a large amount of activity on a site that has nothing to do with schoolwork, how are we addressing that?
That would need to be something that was reported to the IT department from either teachers or administrators so that we could take action.
Anyone else? Mr. Tench, I don't know if you were able to hear anything. Did you have any questions or anything, Mr. Tench?
Hey, Tim.
Hello?
Go ahead, Mr. Tench. If you have any questions for Mr. Myers.
Mr. Tench, can you turn your speakers down in the background?
I am cutting out on you. Can you get? Yeah, can you?
We can hear you, just cutting out a little bit.
I have a question. If the lessons are or the live student is not available, like through daycare or something, they could log.
We're losing your attention.
Yeah, let me. Mr. Tench, you want to relay your question to me and I'll go ahead and forward it.
Feed up. I'm watching, I'm listening, but there's 30-second difference. My question is, if the lessons are available online, couldn't we set up a site that will record the live lessons and have them available for a day or two? Then if a student is not available, like through daycare or whatever, they could log in to get their lessons within 24 hours and not be counted as absent.
Yes, One of those tools being Google Meet offers the ability for teachers to record a session, and then that is saved. Right now, they aren't holding us to any sort of time limit. That would be up to the teacher, but we could then have that available for students who are not able to be at the synchronous session, correct?
Okay, so that would take care of the absent problem then too, I mean, the issue. Because if they could log in at any time after the lesson, if they're not available at the time of the lesson, as long as they're getting lessons, they're getting lessons, they're doing their work, they shouldn't be counted as absent.
That is something we'd have to consider.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tench. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Boynton has one more, James.
James, have we gotten a lot of feedback, any feedback from the parents that want training from the spring that said they needed training on what the children were doing as far as on the computer?
Yeah, we haven't reached out directly with questions for them yet, other than the feedback they sent in some of the end of year surveys, but that will be coming as we're able to put these programs out.
Yeah, especially with the in-person. And I would love for that to be advertised as much as possible. I mean, especially when you have the evening sessions, maybe when you're doing the guided training with them, because I think it's going to be important. Everyone has to be accountable now. And so we need to make sure that our parents are equipped with providing that assistance that's needed.
I agree.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Myers, you said that on the survey, there were questions regarding parents asking about technology and assistance.
That is correct. So on the survey we sent out at the end of the year, there was a place for comments, and that survey had nearly 1,000 responses. And some of, in those responses in the comments section, parents alluded to training on how to use the technology, how to interact with Google Classroom and other software that we use.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Myers. Next.
Good evening. Before I begin to talk about the preschool program, I do have a bit of information for Mrs. Boynton regarding the daycare centers. Through the preschool program, we already have established some relationships with local daycare centers, and we have also already compiled a list of daycare centers that are within the Bedford City school limits. So we're thinking alike. All right, so virtual preschool. As you can imagine, some of the aspects of the virtual preschool program are going to be similar to the things that Mrs. Willis covered when she spoke about the school age program. But by virtue of the fact that we are working with 3- and 4-year-olds, there are going to be some differences. 3- and 4-year-olds do not have the attention span of our school age kids, and not even Dora the Explorer or Baby Shark can sustain the attention of a preschooler for 5 hours. So we put some things in place. Again, there'll be some similarities, but there are some differences. Our teachers and parapros will be in their classrooms during the scheduled teaching times, and they will be recording and posting any whole group synchronous lessons or activities that they're doing with the children. So the kinds of things that will be falling under the whole group category for the preschool children are going to be things like story time, morning meetings, perhaps show and tell, things like that. And then we are also going to be making sure that there is daily whole group instruction. So there'll be an opportunity for the whole class to log in and be a part of the group at least once each day. In addition to that, we are going to be arranging a lot of small group virtual instruction for the kids. So what that might look like is that with a preschool classroom of 9 children, the preschool teacher may be doing a small group session with a group of 4 kids, and then the parapro would also be doing a small group session with a group of 4 children. So they're going to be small group sessions, and they're going to be shorter. For the preschoolers, we're looking at probably 10 to 20 minutes for these sessions scattered throughout the day. Also, individual students will have a one-on-one session with the preschool teacher at least 2 times weekly, and those sessions will be 15 to 20 minutes long. Our teachers and our parapros will be available for parents and for families during the regularly scheduled school day. We will be providing parents with a general monthly calendar, which will outline our themes for each week and provide parents with different activities and resources that they can access at home with the kiddos. And then in addition to that, we will have a specific weekly calendar that will include for each family their scheduled times with the teacher, with the parapro, with the gym teacher, with their therapist if appropriate. Of course, we'll have devices for the students. And Mrs. Willis mentioned supply bags for kids. And what we plan to do is on a weekly basis, provide supply bags to the families. And these are going to be filled with manipulatives and teacher-created supplies and activities that the kids can pull out at home and actually use when they're going through a lesson or an activity with the teacher. An example might be we're making pine cone bird feeders to hang up in our yards at home. So in the supply bag for that week, you'd have the pine cone and the supplies to make the bird feeder, and the kiddos will be putting the things together at home while the teacher is demonstrating. They'll be following along. Of course, we'll be documenting attendance and progress, and we have lots of state mandated screenings and assessments that as of now are still mandated. So we'll be conducting those to the best of our ability, virtually, perhaps in person, and certainly with the input of the parents. So that's the full day program. We also have a half day preschool program, and you probably recall that the half day program serves our preschoolers with disabilities. So there's some differences here. Half day programs will continue to operate 4 days a week. We will continue to have AM and PM sessions. The children will be receiving their specially designed instruction, and they're going to continue that in individual and small group, virtual, teletherapy, perhaps in-person sessions. We will absolutely meet the therapy minutes that are outlined on the IEPs for the children. And then here's a difference for our children with disabilities. They are going to have individual sessions minimally 4 times weekly. So the other group had it minimally twice a week. This group will have it minimally 4 times a week. We're going to follow a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday schedule for the half-day preschool, which is a little different from what we've done historically. It was part of our presentation when we talked about the hybrid program. And the reason for switching up and having Wednesday as our day to write IEPs, meet with parents for IEPs, conduct evaluations, is that in the event that we need to switch or we do switch over to a hybrid model, this was our plan for the hybrid, and it would facilitate an easy transition to that model if that situation arises. Again, continue to monitor student progress. Of course, with special education, we're documenting everything, the student progress, our sessions, progress on IEP goals and objectives, as well as therapy considerations.
Any questions for Ms. Shinter regarding this portion of it? Okay. Mr. Tinch, anything from you? Okay. With that being said, we're just going to, if you have anything for Mr. Tinch, we can always have it answered by Ms. Shinter. But we're going to move right along, okay?
Okay. At this point, I'll turn it over to the Director of Special Education, Mrs. Smilek.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, Mr. President, Madam Vice President, Superintendent, and members of the board. I brought my laptop up here because I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to see it. I'm getting old, but I think I can. Everything that Felice and Diane have discussed, as well as James this evening, coincides with special education. Instruction does not change for our students of special education. Special education is a service and it's not a place. So what that means is we meet the students where they are and design instruction so that they can fully participate with their general education peers. So our teachers, our intervention specialists, will continue to work with our general ed teachers as well as our related service personnel to co-plan, to co-serve, to co-teach within the virtual environment. So what that would look like is they will work with general teachers, general education teachers to design instruction based off of a student's individual need. And that could be a special ed student, or that can be a general ed student or a gifted student. We'll take a look at data, we'll discuss what the needs are of the student, and we'll plan for that virtual instruction. So the teachers will log in together to provide that instruction. They may break off into groups for one-on-one, small group, to reintroduce things, to have additional time, to have conversations with students who are experiencing difficulty to enrich their instructional experiences. Our intervention specialists will continue to manage their caseloads. They will provide individual virtual contact per their student's need. I will not have intervention specialists say that they will meet with their students X amount of times per week because their instructional needs are individualized. You may have a student who has attention concerns or disorganization, executive functioning challenges, who may need to have interaction with their intervention specialist or their case manager daily to help them to plan out their day, to remind them of what it is that they need to do and to help them with those needs. But they also may have a student who is receiving specially designed instruction for reading, and they may just need to meet with them 2 or 3 times a week to assist them with what their needs are. So individual contact will be determined per the student's needs. Teachers will be required to document goals, accommodations, and specially designed instruction to daily instruction. We will continue to look at what are the daily instructional practices that need to occur that's aligned with the standard, and how is this meeting the student's need, whether it's an accommodation or a specially designed instruction. Our teachers will continue to write IEPs and complete evaluations in concert with the team. They will continue to facilitate IEP meetings and join ETR meetings, and all of those meetings will occur virtually. They will complete ongoing progress of students with special needs, and they will continue to document parent contact. It's very important that we continue to reach out to our parents to identify what the students' needs are. If we are unable to identify what the concerns are, we will continue to build those parent partnerships so that parents will feel comfortable with contacting the case manager and saying, my son is, he's anxious, he doesn't like logging on with his friends, he doesn't like logging on with the group, it makes him uncomfortable, so can we do something individual? We want to give parents that option to be able to communicate what they believe their child's needs are. Our teachers will continue to attend virtual TBT meetings to take a look at data and try to determine how best to deliver instruction. Our teachers will be reminded and encouraged to continue to look for, document, and assist students who are not logging on or completing assignments, students who are falling behind or demonstrating slow progress on their goals, to improve specially designed instruction for students experiencing difficulty understanding assignments, and to help parents who are experiencing difficulty with technology or accessing accommodations. We'll have so many supports in place for families, but they're going to be so overwhelmed that they're not going to know what options are available to them. So we will have our intervention specialists, we will have our paraprofessionals, our attendants, who will know how to reach out to technology and say, this parent is having difficulty. They'll be able to help parents access the resources that they need so that they can become more comfortable within a virtual environment. I'm just going to speak briefly about our related services. Special education is a large department. We have school psychologists, occupational therapists, speech therapists, physical therapists, and we all work as a team to deliver instruction. Our school psychologists will continue to manage their caseloads. They will complete evaluations and reevaluations as needed, We will have to determine how we are going to evaluate students. Some things can be done virtually. We can observe in the virtual format. We can ask for parent input. We can give checklists, but we also may need, for those students to come in. And we had students come in over the summer to complete evaluations, and we did so in a successful way. And we would like to continue to do that if that was something that the board is okay with, because there's some things that we would continue to need to do in regards to IQ tests or maybe an academic achievement test that we cannot do virtually. We will continue to facilitate and manage multi-tier system of support team meetings. We will continue to intervene and target areas of need for students and intervene virtually. School psychologists, speech therapists, occupational therapists, intervention specialists will help with the implementation of interventions that will be delivered virtually. General ed teachers will be asked to do that as well, but they will work collaboratively so that they can facilitate how that would happen in a virtual world. Our speech therapists will continue to evaluate. They will continue to provide therapy. Therapy may occur in person. It could be teletherapy, teleconference. It could be parent coaching. It could be blizzard bags. We've collected data, and we'll talk about the data in regards to how students responded to therapy. Some students responded well, others struggled. So we will take a look at the caseload and identify what students need to come in for therapy on a scheduled appointment basis so that we can maximize the safety of all. Maybe that, and that would include, clear masks, so students will be able to see their therapist's face when they're doing speech therapy, or, we may have to touch students to do physical therapy, but we'll follow all of the CDC guidelines to make that happen. We will also have, speech therapists will also continue to work with our intervention specialists and our general education teachers to deliver interventions, language-based interventions within the virtual instructional world. Occupational therapists will do the same. They will continue to work with families for those who could maximize therapy in the home, and we will have students come in to receive therapy who cannot receive it within the home. We have some students with some pretty severe multiple disabilities that really need to be stretched and moved, and it's really difficult. If anyone has ever had physical therapy, if you're not a professional, it becomes a challenge because kids scream, that hurts. But if you're not a professional, you don't know if you're doing things correctly or not. Okay, I wanted to share this data because I want the board to be able to make informed decisions when we talk about virtual participation. I asked that our intervention specialists collect data for us from the fourth quarter to identify how our students responded to virtual participation or virtual instruction. And to take the words from Felice, we were in crisis mode. So when we were planning crazy, trying to get everything together. Parents were trying to plan what they had at home. Some of our parents were essential workers. So some of this data, we have to understand that that's where this has come from as well. Those variables were put in place. Right now, we've had time to think about it. We've had time to do research. We had time to take a look at all of the things that we need to make informed decisions. So it's best that we take a look at this data, but I also want you all to understand that there were some other variables in place that are not necessarily in place currently. So we asked our case managers to give information about their students' participation. Zero meant zero participation. The parent, for whatever reason, did not make the child available to receive instruction. All the way up until a 3 was considered full participation. And if you look to the far left, grades K-3, special education, that's our most vulnerable population besides preschool, they had some trouble. They had the most difficulty comparative to their older students. So if you look at our multiple disability units, those are students who may have severe autism, cognitive challenges, they may have multiple disabilities, they may have several challenges. Their parents may have some challenges with working with them, and we found that 51% of them did not respond to our outreach efforts. And if you look at the inclusive setting, when we say inclusion, these are students who have disabilities, but they're not as significant. They may have a language disability, they may have a specific learning disability, they may have some cognitive challenges, but they could participate in the general education environment. We found that 61% of them did not participate in our virtual platform in the spring. If you look over in grades 4 to 6, far right, you see the numbers get a little bit better. 30% of our inclusive students did fully participate. 28% of the students with multiple disabilities fully participated. The numbers reduced quite a bit, 3% for zero participation and 11% for students with multiple disabilities in those units. Now we're moving up to the middle school, and that's to the far left. If you would see that there were 18% of our inclusive students who did not participate, but it was 0% for students with multiple disabilities. We were able to at least provide some level of instruction to those kids. If you move down to full participation, 18% of our students with disabilities within the inclusive environment fully participated, and 50% of our students with multiple disabilities fully participated. If you look over at the high school, the numbers got better. 36% of our students with special needs within the inclusive environment fully participated, and 31% of our students with multiple needs within a unit fully participated. So the numbers got a little bit better. They're not where we would like for them to be, but it was very telling to us that the students who needed the most help were in our pre-K to 3 world. And looking at related service, this was a bit painful. Zero participation. We had 52% of our students who received some level of speech, OT, PT, whether it was a direct service or a related service. Their parents weren't able to make them available for that therapy. If you look down, maybe 20, I believe that says 27% of our students were fully participated for related services. And over the far right is our K-8 ED special education data. It was kind of a mixed bag. We had 18% of our students who did not participate at all, and 17% who fully participated in virtual instruction. And those numbers varied a little bit. Our middle school ED unit struggled the most. Our elementary ED unit did pretty well, and so did our at Carrollwood and at Columbus. Those students participated. So it was a flip from what occurred from our elementary population. So I just wanted to share a little bit of the parent feedback as to because we asked them, if we could get any information back from them. Parents communicated that they were essential workers and they were overwhelmed with teletherapy. They really just couldn't do it. They tried, and some of them just disappeared, and they just said they couldn't do it. A lot of our parents required technology training to assist their child. They really couldn't do Google Classroom. They really didn't understand how to help their child. Some of our parents just didn't respond to case managers. I think they were overwhelmed themselves with what they had, responsibilities they had in the home. Several students with multiple disabilities in units required maximum adult assistance. They needed assistance to get in the computer. They needed assistance, just navigating all of the different sites within the computer. Some of our students with multiple disabilities are wheelchair bound. So some of them would need some assistance with accessing the curriculum. Some of our students with low cognition had difficulty submitting assignments through Google Classroom, and students demonstrated difficulty sitting for long periods of time, interacting and maintaining attention. So when we talk about all of this information, we need to make sure that the district is mindful of that we have to continue to provide FAPE, which is a free appropriate public education to students. We have to understand that 100% virtual model will likely increase the change of placement requests. A lot of our out-of-district providers are bringing kids in 5 days because they're so small, they're able to socially distance and maintain the CDC guidelines. I don't know if that's going to change now that there was a recommendation for people to stay home, but from now, all of our providers have shared with me that they plan to have students in. So we have, as Dr. Selico have said earlier, we have had conversations with the union leadership, and some teachers have communicated whether they feel comfortable or not with bringing kids in. We're going to continue to look at that and identify how we can help with maintaining the distance, bringing kids in on a schedule. They don't need to be here 5 days, but we need to provide therapy. We need to be able to have some hands-on interaction with these students because developmentally, they definitely need it. We need in-person evaluations, and we need to make sure that we are implementing equitable practices for students with special needs.
Okay. Any questions for Ms. Mel?
I have one question.
Okay.
Will,
Ms.
I'm
Boynton,
sorry,
go right ahead.
will your staff be available after school hours for those parents?
I am uncertain of what I want to say yes, since we had some conversations, since Felice provided that intervention, teachers will be available during the night hours. I'm not sure how that'll play out. I don't have any control over that.
We're uncertain. We really can't answer that at this time. That's an issue that we would have to discuss with the union. Certainly, I know that teachers currently, whether we're virtual or not, make calls in the evenings to parents, and mostly because during the day you don't have time to do it because you're with students. And so, can we mandate that or make it? Now without a conversation with the union, but that certainly is on our list. And as Mrs. Willis had mentioned, the tutoring in the evening and having access to other outside tutors, not necessarily the teacher, him or herself.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have to work on that.
I believe we talked about teachers having office hours. We will have paraprofessional support. So hopefully if a parent is having some challenges, hopefully we can have paraprofessionals reaching out to them just to identify what the concern is before responding or figuring out a time where a teacher could provide some support. We will have paraprofessionals who will log in or who will log in with the teacher to deliver instruction or have individual sessions with students, and perhaps we can get some feedback from families. It will still be during the day, but that will give us better options to be able to have one staff reaching out to families if the teacher is unavailable because they're providing instruction.
Will ODE be a little bit lenient with special ed?
Could you say that again?
Will ODE be a little bit lenient with special ed?
No, they never
because
are.
of this situation?
No? They weren't lenient in March. They told us that they didn't relax on any of the guidelines. They said it was due in 60 days. The evaluation was due in 60 days. They said IEPs were due on time. They gave us absolutely zero flexibility with those guidelines. They did say that we can provide teletherapy. That was something that was new with Medicaid billing requirements and teletherapy. They allowed that. So we had to make sure that parents were in agreement that their evaluations were going to be late, or we had to say, if you want your evaluation to be on time, then you have to agree to certain parts of the evaluation that won't be a part of the evaluation if we could still make a determination without that portion, that IQ test or that achievement test that we didn't get to. Thankfully, all of our parents agreed. I don't know if any corrective action plans will occur as a result, but ODE was not very lenient when it came to those things. And that's why I'm concerned about FAPE.
That's exactly what I was going to say, because we're going to be in compliance.
Mhm.
We have to be more flexible because it's unprecedented. This is what's happening. This is what the hands we've been dealt. So we have to really take a close look at that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else, Ms. Patterson?
Yes, with all the data that you have shown us, and I thought I heard you say that a lot of the parents of students with disabilities were essential workers.
Well, the ones that we got information about when we were able to say, why can't you make your child available? Some of them said, I'm an essential worker and I'm just overwhelmed. I can't do it.
So what provisions are we going, since we have this information, what provisions are we going to make for them for now?
I have my speech therapist, occupational therapist, they all kept data on the kids who performed well in a virtual environment for therapy and those that did not. So if we could bring those kids in that did not perform well virtually on a schedule, they may come in 1-on-1, they may come in 1-3, we can still remain within CDC's guidelines and socially distance and provide them with therapy.
I got a quick question, Mr. Stevens.
Mr. Kennedy.
You brought up a point, Ms. Willis, but I think it covers the whole gamut of everything. But you mentioned if there are technology issues with the child can't get on or the parent can't get on, and Mr. Myers, you might have addressed this, but I guess I'm looking at it as I don't want our teachers, our intervention specialists dealing with a lot of computer issues. And when their time needs to be spent somewhere else. So how are we going to address it? If are we staffed enough to, in case you get inundated with technology issues, I don't want an intervention specialist spending 20 minutes to a half hour trying to figure out how to get a child online or a parent and so forth.
That's currently something that our new help desk system will help us record. So now we can get parent phone calls into that system, parent interactions into that system, and then we'll know how we can staff accordingly if we need to do that at that time.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else, Ms. Malik? Mr. Myers, did you have anything from Mr. Tench?
Yes, Mr. Tense writes in and wants to know if you know the reasons why there were such high numbers of non-participation in K-3.
Not more than what we've already presented. Parents didn't, a lot of them, my teacher said that they just didn't respond to outreach efforts. And so, or they didn't return the blizzard bags or things like that. So I'm not exactly sure for that specific population, other than the fact that some of them were overwhelmed or some of them didn't respond. We can definitely reach out to those families again. We have the names of those kids. I have everyone's caseload, and we can absolutely reach out and identify if there's something that we can do to provide the support they need so that they can fully participate.
Yeah, that's a good point. I look at that data and for on the surface for what it's worth. I mean, that data is from something that everybody was going through, things that we didn't know what was happening.
Right.
I'd be shocked or concerned if we got this data
Again.
6 months from now.
Right.
But that data doesn't surprise me.
Mm-hmm.
Again, if we see it 6 months from now, then we have to step back and say, what?
I mean, we thought we were coming back in 3 weeks,
Yeah.
So, and they just kept getting pushed back, and maybe parents were saying, well, once they get in school, I mean,
Our school's almost over.
and yeah, so we'll definitely take a look at those. They'll have a new case manager next year. We really don't loop them, but we always have those transition meetings, those hot button conversations. Teachers talk to each other about those kids that really need the support.
So that data, how did you get that data?
I had all of my intervention specialists, we sent out a form for them to complete in May.
Okay, so is that something in the event we go virtual, is that something we could do, in the next, every 2 months?
I plan to.
Okay.
I plan to
see where we're at.
keep up on it.
Okay.
And those parents that have not made their child available for whatever reason, we're going to reach out to them and try to see if we can help them. So we'll utilize our social emotional staff, which would be our mental health therapists, our social workers, that's their role. There can be something that's preventing them in the community that we need to assist them with, and our social workers can absolutely help them with that. So we're not going to just sit and wait. If they're not participating, we are going to reach out to them. We're going to go to them.
And I would just interject, we had a slide in here and I took it out, and I had asked Ms. Shenter to look at our percentage, and the board may recall me sharing with you the updates, and we were looking at participation overall. So I've had Diane track that to see how many parents we hadn't heard from, how many students, and if not, we were reaching out to them. And I will say the percentages were very high, especially at our elementary levels. The blizzard bags, that were returned. We had a really good turnout. Even though we're seeing this with special education, I will say as a whole, our numbers and return rate of the work and parent contact was very high. It was very good. It was the 80s, 90s in most areas.
So for the K through 3 data, were K through 3 virtual?
They had Blizzard bags and then they went virtual.
Only third grade went virtual at the very end of it, like the last, I don't know how long was it? Does anybody on my team know? 4 weeks?
It was
The last 4 weeks. We started with the Blizzard bags, and then as we said, as it kept getting longer, we thought we better do some.
So that was included with those Blizzard bags, because that's how we provided instruction to them. And our therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapists, they put things in those Blizzard bags to assist those kids with what it is that they needed. Or parents would receive videos from our related service personnel as to how to deliver certain things to the kids. But some of them responded and some of them didn't.
Okay, so that data for K through 3 wasn't all virtual. It also had to do with the bags. And,
Yeah.
Okay,
And we will continue to track that. I will be requesting reports.
okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I definitely would like to see it, because I know at the beginning, it was helter-skelter. We were all over the place trying to put things in place. Now, like you had indicated, we do have a little time to prepare, put some things in place, and so that everyone is on board of the direction that we're going to go in. So
Yeah.
I would like to see those numbers at an ongoing pace as well, because I like to see that.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe Mr. Elder is next.
I'm going to do a baseball introduction. Watching the Indians. Good evening, board, and good evening, cabinet. Thank you again for listening to this plan that we have. I have 3 slides to close out here for this evening. The one thing that I do want to talk about starting is an adoption to looking at an addendum to our handbook. You heard this unprecedented time. There's some things that we need to kind of talk through in terms of being prepared for our students and have that in our handbook. You've already taken a look at the handbook and approved that handbook for the year. So what we're looking at doing is adding in an addendum to the handbook that will add to the website. And then you can see there the 4 things that we're looking to cover new to address COVID, which would include some language around face coverings, some expectations for our students in a virtual world, the alternative to suspension for a student in a virtual world, understanding that, what we saw in the spring was that some students, did have some things that we needed to address in terms of their behavior, or even looking at places that they weren't supposed to be. I think Mr. Kennedy asked that question about websites and making sure that we take care of that. Knowing that, we're going to have students who are going to have limited opportunities, we don't want to just suspend their learning opportunity, but we want to make sure that there's some language in our handbook that covers what our expectations for students are. And then you've had some questions about attendance. The Ohio Department of Education is having some guidelines around attendance and taking attendance. What we plan on doing is a period by period attendance. So where you're supposed to be based on your class schedule, we want the staff to take attendance for that time and be able to record that. We also want to make sure that we are communicating with parents when students aren't attending virtually. So we'll still be able to utilize our robocalls and text messages and emails to parents to notify them when students aren't participating one way or another. As you've heard from just about everybody here, our SEL team members, will work together to help support those students who aren't engaging for whatever reason. Go to the next slide, please. So as you've heard, our SEL team includes our school psychs, our school counselors, our social workers, our mental health therapists, and related service personnel. What we would like to do is continue to do the supportive things that we would do in a day-to-day, non-virtual world virtually. That would include, making sure that there's connected resources for parents, students in terms of food, financial assistance, clothing, those types of things. One of the things that we are looking at opening for this year is the clothing closet at Bedford High School. We had some volunteers that worked on putting that together. They actually bought us some racks and actually a washer and dryer. And our hope was that we would open that this fall for parents to come in to get community resources. So we have some stuff here naturally that will be able to help with parents and families that are in need. But there's also some other community resources that we're going to make sure that we connect parents to. Our SEL team members will be conducting just regular check-ins with our students and their families. For those individuals, like you heard me say before, that aren't attending or aren't engaging in the virtual environment, we're going to be following up with phone calls, home visits. We also have a truancy officer that will be working with those teams to make sure that we are following through with the necessary steps that we need to take to make sure that they're attending. We have a handful of families that right now their home is not a stable environment, or this is not their regular home. So we will definitely make sure that for foster care and homeless families, we're providing that support. Our mental health therapists, our social workers, our school counselors will be providing telehealth and therapy and small group virtually and or by phone. In the spring, what we did when we saw some concerning things where students there was no engagement whatsoever, we did work with the local police department to do some wellness checks and knocked on a few doors to check to see if people were okay. Our social workers and our mental health therapists do provide some direct support for students with disabilities through their IEP or their 504. Our school counselors will be making sure that our students who are in the high school and middle school are on track for graduation and meeting those requirements. We will continue to reach out to parents and provide updates on a regular basis. And each one of these team members will serve as members of the MTSS process. I'm in the process now of having some discussions with our Beachbrook service provider. They will continue to work with our families by providing therapy either through telehealth or through the screen door process. And so we have a therapist who is scheduled to be in each one of the buildings handling a caseload of individuals that are supplied to them by our teachers and our SEL team members. And then the last thing you see on this slide is that our SEL members will serve as support for our teachers by providing them training opportunities. In the spring, we offered some table talk for our staff members in areas about recognizing signs and symptoms of individuals who may be struggling with depression, or those individuals who may have any other connected needs. So we're going to continue to do that. We have created a SEL website that parents can also use to access videos and things to help support them in dealing with COVID and everything else, social justice and what have you. Next slide, please. In the spring, we launched our meal distribution with collaboration with our nutrition services and our transportation department. And we provided breakfast and lunch for students under the age of 18, 5 days a week. We saw in the spring an average of about 400 meals that were picked up every day. We offered that in a couple different fashions. The first fashion was that we had a 2-time location pickup at Bedford High School, one between 11 and 1, and again 4 to 6. And then we also had 2 buses that went around to all 4 communities in about 20-minute increments, providing meals for people to pick up in a off-site location. Our plan for meal distribution coming forward is to continue the 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock time and offer the grab-and-go sites remotely and expand those to more sites, but stick to the mid part of the day. Good question. So and then the next thing for parent support, I know that, James and his team are going to offer parents some opportunities at some technology support. Last year, we started a partnership with Beachbrook for a Parent Connect group. And that group is a group that is a 10-week session for about 12 to 16 parents of teens or preteen children. It's a supportive group. They work on, different skills, techniques, and just be there to support one another. We hope to start that in the fall and again, run another session in the spring. And I've already talked about the SEL resources website, which is pretty extensive, and it provides information at grade bands. The SEL team did an excellent job putting this together. They did a lot of research. We viewed a resource website from about 6 or 7 different area school districts, and we found what we needed for our students here, and we have put together a lot that we're going to continue to add to as we move forward. So that's all I have for this evening. Do you have any questions?
I have a question.
Ms. Patterson?
Mr. Elder,
Yes, ma'am.
how many students do we have that's on expulsion?
How many students are on expulsion? All the students that we would have expelled for last year will be returning. Since we did not have school in the spring, there were no expulsions from March on. So all those students have met their requirements and can return back from expulsion.
Grab and go, 11 to 1?
11 to 1.
Their lunch, how are the students going to do that if they only have lunch for 30 minutes and they have to be online?
That's a good question. That's one of the things that we kind of talked about and tried to figure out the best time with school being, during the regular school time. We're trying to figure out how we can actually staff that in a time to allow folks to be able to get to whatever site they need to get to. The hope is that offering, the drive-through site at the high school will allow parents to come pick that up for their kids. The remote site, hopefully by expanding that, will allow them a shorter commute to go and grab lunch at whatever period of time they can do that.
May have to adjust the schedule for lunch since they're only getting 30 minutes.
And we're also exploring, continuing in late afternoon, early evening option too.
Thank you.
Anyone else for Mr. Elder? Mr. Tench, go ahead.
Mr. Tench asks, what would constitute a suspension in the virtual education world?
That's a great question. So I had this conversation today with other pupil services directors specifically about that. And I think the interruption or disruption of the virtual environment is one of those things that we will have to take a look at. What we saw in the spring is a rash of individuals who would utilize that screen time for something other than the academics. Maybe they were inappropriate with their language or their behavior. They, potentially jumped in a place where they weren't supposed to be in, or, a meeting that they weren't supposed to be in, those types of things. So that's one of the things that we need to look in terms of the language is what would be something that we would have to take a look at. I'm not sure if we're looking at suspension versus, possibly limiting the opportunities for those individuals to be participating in the group in a disruptive fashion. So the recorded lessons, the opportunities for learning outside of working within a group may be some options that we have to explore.
Anything else, Mr. Elder? Thank you, Mr. Elder. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, we heard quite lengthy presentations from Dr. Selico's team, and you've worked very hard in doing so. Really appreciate that. Ms. Duncan, thank you for coming and hearing it firsthand, Union President, hearing it firsthand and being able to see it firsthand and hearing it, and to be able to work with your staff as well and seeing where things are and the direction that we're trying to go regarding this virtual, if we go that route. So I want to thank you for being here as well. Ms. Willis, one quick thing, please, and I know you did your presentation and so forth, but I do have concerns. What would we do with phys ed and those type of things? And we didn't touch bases with that. Please come ahead, come forward.
Actually, I just got things from the ODE today. They are doing some in-service for world language, HPE, career tech, some of those courses that may be more difficult to go virtual. They're providing them with some training. And online learning platforms offer phys ed online. So I think a lot of times, like in our high school platform, when they take phys ed, they read about physical fitness or whatever, and then they're keeping like an activity log and things like that. So they're doing some learning online, and then they're going out and logging their own exercise and their statistics, their weight, their BMI, that kind of stuff. So I feel like within many of the other subjects, we're going to have to be very creative, but I do see the ODE stepping up to help.
Okay, thank you. Like I said, I know these are challenging times, and we're doing the best we can to accommodate, looking at safety and the whole work. So once again, thank you for everything that you have done, and you're putting things in place. I know that we had a couple of breaking news regarding the health, Department of Health and those type of things. Those are just some recommendations, and I do believe that those things need to be looked at and thought about seriously, but still, it's our determination of which direction we still need to go in, virtual or blended hybrid model. I do understand that. Coming from the health department is very serious, and we will, take those things in consideration as well. But once again, is our determination of what direction we need to go in.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Ms. Patterson.
Dr. Selico, our students have their schedules already?
Tentative, right. They have tentative schedules. And actually, the elementary students too, when the principals return is when they get theirs sent.
Anything else? Dr. Selico, you have anything, Mr. Myers? It must be from Tim Tinch, once again. Thanks.
Mr. Tench writes, I truly appreciate all the hard work the entire staff has done, especially regarding curriculum.
Thank you, Mr. Tinch. Thank you.
Could I say something?
Go ahead.
Kudos to Dr. Selico and her team. Great job. And thank you for entertaining all of our questions, because it does help us. For me especially, I have to speak for me. I like a lot of clarification, so I tend to ask a lot of questions. Thank you so much for entertaining them.
And it's okay to ask a lot of questions, Ms. Morrington. That's the only way you know and find out.
All the time.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Dr. Selico, you want to wrap some things up here?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Stevens. And I would like to echo what Mr. Tench had said, and Mrs. Boynton. I appreciate the positive remarks for recognizing the work that this team has done. I was sitting here, we went through it once before, and so now this is, I probably have it memorized almost, but we've heard it a few times now and reading it over and over. But the amount of work in such a short period of time should be applauded. And we really have tried. I think you can see how robust the plan is, and that we were trying to think of every detail, but clearly we can't think of everything. So I would encourage the board, if you still can continue to have questions, please call. And for the public, know that the board members do ask a number of questions and clarifying information, so that they have that information to in order to make the best decisions that they can. So I do appreciate the communication that we've had quite a bit. Spent a lot of time on the phone with board members, and appreciate their questions and concerns for our students. And just want, again, parents to know that this is not an easy decision. It's not taken lightly. Again, the most difficult decision. As I'm sitting here, I apologize for my phone blowing up, but with the news release, we get lots of updates and lots of superintendents scrambling right now to ask what everyone is going to be doing, because we do talk. I would be lying if I told you that we don't talk about these things, because we are trying to figure out what everyone is doing and what their thoughts are. So with more to come, board, I appreciate your time for this presentation, allowing it. And then next week, we have another board meeting at 6 o'clock. It will be the same, obviously same setup, right, Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
And so we will be deliberating. And in the meantime, please address any questions, send them my way. And that's it for this evening. So thank you again, team. Outstanding job. Very proud of you. Thank you.
Yep, good job.
Thank you. Board members, one thing I would like to do is, and after speaking with Dr. Selico briefly before our meeting, there is something that we do need to go into executive session just briefly for about 5-10 minutes. And that she would like to update us on a few things that just came to, yes, we'll stay. That she needs, and it's time sensitive. That's why I said we need to meet right after. So if we can go into the bit of executive session after this meeting. So I would like to make a motion to go into executive session to consider an appointment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee.
Second.
Okay. Second, I made the motion, second by Mr. Kennedy to go into executive session. Please call the roll.
Mr. Stevens?
Aye.
Mr. Kennedy?
Aye.
Mrs. Boynton?
Aye.
Mrs. Patterson?
Aye.
Mr. Tench?
We got it, Mr. Tench. Thank you. Okay, we're going to go into executive session at 6:54. Thank you. Thank you for everyone for joining us. Thank you very much.